From Hong Kong to Cairo, from New York to Paris, people are looking to the new millennium with confidence. There is nothing to be worried about. Or is there? Over the last few years, things have been happening. The spread of AIDS, massive tornadoes and earthquakes, the new aggression of Iraq, stock markets out of control. Things that, viewed separately, may not make much sense, but put together, these signs fall in place like pieces of a puzzle foretold by prophecies of hundreds, even thousands of years ago. What if they're right?
Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, with famines and earthquakes throughout the world.
The Red Army is on full alert.
The power grid is shut down. Water supply is disrupted. The president has called out the National Guard.
We thought we could look forward to a long-term peace, a prosperous global economy of the New World Order. So what about these prophecies of coming disasters? What did these prophets know that we don't? This is where it all began, 5 millennia ago. A place of ancient rites and beliefs that remained unchanged for thousands of years. A place of secrets. No one quite knows the meaning of the Sphinx, nor do we know how the Egyptians could build their massive pyramids in so perfect and complex a form. The largest of the pyramids is dedicated to Cheops, or Khufu. It can be entered through a gallery. Some scholars believe that this gallery is a vast and detailed prophecy. Each inch, carefully delineated in stone, represents 1 year. The hieroglyphics describe individual events, which some suggest include the birth of Christ and 2 major world wars. Just before the king's chamber, this amazing timeline comes to an end. The last date is 2001. Human civilization ends. Why, we don't know. It is a refrain that returns in countless prophecies from around the world. A vision of great turmoil and destruction at the beginning of the 21st century. Why? Perhaps one answer can be found in astrology. Since the earliest of times, astrologers have divided history into a series of ages that correspond to the signs of the zodiac. Each astrological age lasts some 2,000 years. The history of mankind since the birth of Christ took place in the age of Pisces, or fish, an age dominated by the church. Starting in the year 2000, a new age will begin. The age of Aquarius, an age dominated by Saturn, symbol of science. The Incas and Mayas were masters in astrology. Some believe that the Inca shrine in Machu Picchu, first discovered in 1991, serves as a giant observatory. The Mayas, too, organized the history of the world in astrological cycles of 25,000 years. They built pyramids not unlike those in ancient Egypt, and they created a calendar of human history known as the Tzolk'in. It predicts a major catastrophe in the early part of the third millennium in the year 2012.
The world shall rock to and fro. The white man will battle people in other lands, people who possess the first light of wisdom.
There is a remarkable similarity between the prophecies of the Mayas and those of Indian tribes of North America, including the Hopi. All believe that the rhythm of life and the cycles of nature are fully intertwined. But materialism and the pace of modern science have ruptured this intimate link. We have lost touch with the cosmic forces that created us to begin with. Man and the earth are on a collision course. In many ways, the collision course began here in Florence around the year 1400. A long-budding interest in the art, science, and literature of antiquity finally broke free and out into the open, no longer restrained by church dogma. The era of the Renaissance began. In 1503, the same year that Leonardo began work on the Mona Lisa, another man of the Renaissance was born, a man with quite a different vision of the world.
Earth-shaking fire from the center of the earth will cause the towers around the new city to shake.
Natural disasters, floods and hurricanes, turmoil and war, a world out of joint. This would be the legacy of a Renaissance man named Michel de Nostradamus, or Nostradamus, a man soon praised and reviled the world over. Michel came from a well-to-do family in a small town in the French Provence. He was educated in Avignon and later in Montpellier, where he studied medicine. He became a physician, but remained passionately devoted to astrology, a science which, in the early 16th century, was still considered heresy by the church. Around that time, the plague swept through France and Europe, killing millions. Instead of bleeding his patients, Nostradamus ordered his assistants to collect rose petals and to grind them into powder. From these, he created primitive vitamin C tablets. Hundreds of plague victims were saved. But Nostradamus had a unique gift. He actually saw visions. Visions which, starting in 1552, he began to record in a set of books known as the Centuries. That in itself wasn't exceptional. The Middle Ages were full of prophets, magicians, and soothsayers. But Nostradamus was different. His prophecies actually came true. One day, Nostradamus had a vision of the French king, Henry II, in a joust.
On the field of combat in a single battle, He will pierce his eyes through a cage of gold. 2 wounds made 1. Then he dies a cruel death.
3 years after Nostradamus committed his vision to paper, the book was brought to the attention of Catherine de' Medici, the Queen of France. A Florentine of the ruling house of the Medici, she hated the cold weather and damp castles of the French. What's more, Henry II ignored her in favor of other, more pliant ladies at the court. Still, she did warn the king not to ride in a joust. He laughed it off. The next great tournament was held near Paris in the spring of 1559. King Henry II rode in it.
Then he dies a cruel death.
The death of King Henry left Catherine as the absolute ruler of France. She rewarded Nostradamus by granting him protection for life. His fame spread throughout France and across Europe. In preparation for his seance, Nostradamus would light a candle and pour steaming water into a brass bowl.
I empty my soul, my brain and my heart of all care. Slowly, a deep tranquility and stillness of mind comes over me. Prophetic heat approaches, like rays of the sun, casting shadows of ethereal shapes and forms. Then comes the clouded vision of great and terrible events, sad and plentiful, human exploits of catastrophic proportions. From the enslaved people, songs, chants, and demands. The princes and lords are held captive in prisons. In the future, demands by headless idiots will be received as divine expressions. Out of the deepest part of Western Europe, from poor people, a young child will be born, who with his speech shall seduce the masses. They shall pursue crosses of iron, topsy-turvy. Liberty will not be regained. Roman power will be debased, following in the footsteps of its great neighbor. Secret and civil hatreds and conflict will stop the folly of the buffoon. The fortress of the besieged will be pounded to its depths by explosives. The traitor will be entombed alive. Never did such a pitiful division come about.
Seven, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2,
engine sequence start. 1, 0, launch commit. We have a liftoff. All engines building up thrust.
The scourge now past, the world becomes smaller. For a long time, the lands will be ruled by peace. People will travel safely by air, land, and sea. Man shall come to a corner of Luna, where he'll be taken and placed on an alien land.
Nostradamus was very concerned with the future of the papacy in Rome. A 12th century Irish priest named Malachi once had a vision. He saw the entire succession of 112 popes pass before his eyes. He wrote his vision down. Up to now, all of his predictions have come true. Malachi refers to John Paul II as the Pope in the mark of the sun. Nostradamus calls this Polish pontiff simply the Pole. Both Malachi and Nostradamus warned the current pope to beware of his enemies. Both believed there is more turmoil ahead for the future popes in Rome.
Nine will be set apart from the human flock. Separated from judgment and counsel, their fate will be determined on departure.
9, 8, 7, 6. We have main engine start. 4, 3, 2. And liftoff.
The unripe fruit will be the source of great scandal and great blame.
Until recently, most Nostradamus scholars struggled with verse 32 of the fourth book of the Centuries. It was unbelievable, precisely because it was so explicit. The verse predicts, in no uncertain terms, the fall of the Soviet Empire.
The communal law will be made in opposition. The old order will hold strong, but then removed from the scene. Then communism put far behind.
After this prediction came true, Nostradamus and his visions of the future gained a whole new meaning. They could no longer be dismissed. What does this mean for us? Could a medieval doctor from the Provence be right about great turmoil just on the horizon?
Nostradamus didn't actually write at the end of a century. He was more or less plunked down in the very middle of his century. But certainly his most specific prediction targets 1999.
When Saturn is in Aquarius and Sagittarius is ascendant, disease and pestilence as the century approaches renewal.
Most modern scholars have tried to link the prophecy of pestilence to the rapid growth of AIDS. AIDS, like the plague in the days of Nostradamus, is still spreading, particularly in Africa. Modern science is powerless to stop it. Millions more will die before a cure can be found. And yet, the vision of a great pestilence may have a very different meaning. In the 1980s, a virus called Michelangelo caused havoc with computers. In 1999, the Melissa virus created even greater damage, thanks to the far-flung reach of the internet.
There are those who believe that the millennium hype is a figment of our imagination. Passing into the year 2000 is simply another day in a man-made calendar. Life goes on, nothing changes. Astronomers would not agree. If nothing else, they see major changes happening in our solar system. On May 5th, 2000, the new moon will move itself in a straight alignment with the Earth, Jupiter, Saturn, and the Sun. Solar flares will increase 20%. The Earth will be gripped in a sudden and unprecedented gravitational pull. So much, in fact, that the Earth's polar axis could be ripped out of joint. The American visionary, Edgar Cayce, prophesied that this event would lead to a string of unprecedented natural disasters.
In the great turmoil of winds and oceans, part of England will be submerged. New York, Los Angeles, and San Francisco will be destroyed. The greater portion of Japan must go into the sea. Northern Europe will be changed, as in the twinkling of an eye.
Nostradamus also described a major disaster around Easter of 2000, precisely when the alignment of the planets is scheduled to occur.
There will be a tremendous earthquake. A great theater filled with people will be ruined. The air, heaven, and the earth will be dark and obscure.
There are many other modern prophets who have warned of great natural disasters, and none more clearly than a group of 1,700 scientists, including many Nobel laureates, who in 1992 issued a major warning to the world. First, they warned that our freshwater tables are sinking. 40% of the world population faces long-term drought. For the other half, drinking water is slowly dwindling by the steady poisoning of rivers and streams. The oceans are particularly at risk. Each year, millions of tons of garbage are dumped by freighters and cruise ships. More fish are being caught than the oceans can resupply. Some fisheries have already collapsed altogether. The reason is that the oceans themselves have begun to erode, and with it, the most precious asset of the undersea's food chain, the coral reef.
Coral reef is one of the richest environments. The variety of life there is fantastic. And we discovered too that there's a tremendous treasure in biochemistry there. All sorts of strange chemicals that the creatures of the reef produce. Many of them have great medical value.
When Arthur C. Clarke first came to Sri Lanka in 1963, the reefs were full of tropical fish, and the corals were alive.
Now when you go back many of these areas now, I call them coral cemeteries. The coral is bleached and white. There are very few fish. Much of it is now a disaster area.
Tourism, fishing, coral mining, and pollution have destroyed the reefs, and with it, the fish it once sustained. It is a story that is being repeated around the world, from Jamaica to Egypt, from Tahiti to the Florida Keys. The food banks of the coral reefs are dying, putting the entire ecosystem of the oceans at risk. In 1992, scientists of the International Coral Reef Symposium in Guam estimated that by 2050, 70% of the Earth's coral reefs will be gone. Human-induced pollution, dumping, and tourism is one factor. Another is fishing. For many years, fishermen in Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Singapore dumped cyanide poison to stun and capture large fish. The cyanide was left to settle and kill all life on the bottom. The temperature of the oceans is steadily rising, yet an increase of only a few degrees is enough to kill the tiny algae that nurture coral reefs. Action is needed now, on a global scale, if we want to avert disaster.
So it's like the rainforest. We're destroying something which is a treasure house, which could be used for the benefit of all mankind if we discover it in time before we destroy it.
We never get food from the space, no. We get food from the earth, you know. Indian people says Mother Earth. I think that's a good name. The earth is just like mother.
Like the coral reefs, the rainforests, too, are at grave risk. Each minute, 30 acres of rainforest are destroyed. By the end of each day, some 100 square miles of oxygen-breathing forest are gone forever. At this rate, most of the tropical rainforest will be gone before the end of the next century. The net result of this ecological erosion is an alarming loss of species. By the year 2100, 1/3 of all the Earth's species will be gone. At the same time, the total world population of 5 billion will double or even triple. If this prophecy holds true, then by the end of the next century, twice as many people will be fighting for half the available amount of water and food supplies. There are other destructive forces at work. One is global warming.
Sea level has probably risen by something between 10 and 20 centimeters over the last 100 years. The most that we expect sea level to rise over the next century is perhaps by about a meter.
The other is the erosion of the ozone layer. The ozone protects us from solar ultraviolet radiation, but has been steadily depleted by the emission of industrial chemicals known as CFCs.
We can't always use fossil fuels for the production of electricity. There are many environmental reasons why you don't want to do that. One of the most popular now, of course, is the addition of CO2 to the atmosphere. We don't need to panic, but we ought to be making those kinds of research and development plans that we have an alternative to coal and other fossil fuels in the not-too-distant future.
El Niño is partly caused by the pollution of our oceans and our air. The El Niño season of 97-98 caused billions of dollars worth of damage.
Got one now and it's going down. It's on the ground. On the ground.
A rash of hurricanes lashed the coasts of South and North America, changing weather patterns across Europe, and produced a number of monster attacks by tornadoes in the United States.
So many earthquakes, so many, destroyed tornadoes, people's life, positions. We are damaging everything, environment by ourselves.
Every single producer or multinational would solely attempt to increase their profit irrespective of the kind of damage or cost that they will impose on society. So here comes the role of government when we talk about globalization, the impact on the environment, and of course the ecology in general.
Stand by, we just picked up Dive 2 on the horizon at 60 miles.
To biochemist James Lovelock, phenomena like El Nino are no accident. In fact, it is only the beginning. He believes the Earth is a highly delicate and intelligent organism, very much like the human body. It will intervene in order to secure its survival, no matter how drastic the measures. If he is right, then one more prophecy by Nostradamus will become a reality.
Earth-shaking fire from the center of the Earth will cause the towers around the new city to shake.
War, man's ultimate peril. As if the threat to our ecosystem weren't enough, mankind continues to build the weapons to destroy Earth many times over. And as some prophets believe, the first signs of a coming thermonuclear war are already visible today.
For a long time, the lands will be ruled by peace. People will travel safely by air, land, and sea. Then, wars will start again.
От имени народа и правительства СССР я заверяю всех американцев, что мы искренне стремимся к улучшению наших отношений.
For many years after the fall of the Soviet Union, it looked like President Bush's vision of a new world order had become reality. Russia and the United States were partners in peace. Eastern Europe was free. South Africa elected a black president. Even China, the only major communist power on earth, embraced Western trade and investments with open arms. Then, starting in 1998, the great new order started to crumble. Russia's economy collapsed. India and Pakistan, free from superpower restraints, escalated a nuclear arms race. Now armed with nuclear missiles, they once again came to blows over the province of Kashmir. Iraqi President Saddam Hussein announced he would no longer cooperate with UN weapons inspectors. US and Britain ordered airstrikes, but with little effect. Yugoslav President Milosevic launched an all-out war against ethnic Albanians in the Serbian province of Kosovo. NATO responded with a devastating air war, which deeply upset relations between Russia and the United States. To make matters worse, the US mistakenly bombed the Chinese embassy in Belgrade. China was furious. Then, a congressional investigation concluded that China had stolen highly classified secrets of no less than 7 American nuclear warheads. 10 years after the fall of the Berlin Wall, the world is back on the verge of a Cold War between nuclear powers. Armageddon, the great clash of the apocalypse. All prophecies have spoken of a last and decisive battle of the worlds. One such man was a convict named John. He was a member of the early Christian church of Ephesus, who was captured by the Romans.
The big question among scholars and Christians, of course, is which John, or who is this John? Many people assume that since John is such a popular Christian name, that the author of this book, who does call himself John, must be the same as the apostle named John, the son of Zebedee, to whom the 4th Gospel is attributed, as well as the so-called letters of John. But these days, most scholars realize that the style of the book of Revelation is so different from the Gospel and the letters that they are most likely not written by the same person.
John was sentenced to the stone quarries of Patmos, just off the coast of today's Turkey. At Patmos, John began to have visions of the end of the world. He saw a book enclosed by 7 seals. Each seal reveals a new phase of the apocalypse. The breaking of the 7th seal brings forth an army of 200 million soldiers that will kill 1/3 of the world's population.
They killed with sword, famine, and pestilence. Demon spirits went abroad to assemble the kings of the world for battle on the great day of God the Almighty, in a place called Armageddon.
We are living in an era where we grew up with science fiction movies. And so somebody who wants to make that kind of an apocalyptic good versus evil movie, as George Lucas did, we have him using spaceships and lightsabers and all sorts of other, contraptions that we're used to seeing from our sci-fi literature and sci-fi movies. Well, in the 1st century, in order to describe this struggle between good and evil, of course they made use of the symbols that were available in their own day and age, in their own repertoire. And so we find swords and trumpets and horses and plagues and all sorts of other images that we might find very strange, but would have been completely and totally understandable to people of the 1st century when they're reading this.
In a place called Armageddon.
The choice of Armageddon, or Megiddo, was no accident. Since the days of the Egyptian Empire, Megiddo had been the battlefield of the Middle East. Edgar Cayce, too, believes that the last great war would erupt in the Middle East.
In Libya, and in Egypt, in Ankara, and in Syria, through the straits around those areas above Australia, in the Indian Ocean and the Persian Gulf.
And so does Nostradamus. With breathtaking accuracy, Nostradamus describes exactly how the events of the last 27 years, beginning in 1979, will propel us to World War III.
The great empire will invade, but the Muslims will find the lands exposed. the old law of Islam will decline, and another more seductive one will rise.
Civil war erupts in Beirut. Peacekeeping forces sent by President Reagan are the victim of a major suicide attack.
The cruel sect of the Muslims will come, hiding weapons under their robes, sending ahead clever men without laws.
The next phase, a new Russia is reborn, led by Boris Yeltsin. Arabs join Western nations to evict Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait.
Now, the 28 countries with forces in the Gulf area have exhausted all reasonable efforts to reach a peaceful resolution, have no choice but to drive Saddam from Kuwait by force. We will not fail.
One day, the great powers will become friends. Their great power will be seen to increase. The new land will be at the height of its power. To the man of blood, the number is reported.
Then a violent war erupts in Kosovo. Russia and the US take sides. The great superpower alliance is unraveling.
The two will not remain allied for long. Within 13 years, they surrender to barbarism.
13 years after the fall of the Soviet Union, the long-simmering tensions in the Balkans and the Middle East will lead to a new war. The Hopi Indians have warned the same.
World War III will be started by those peoples who first revealed the light of divine wisdom in the old world. Mesopotamia, the center of Islam today.
Local conflicts in Europe and the Middle East gradually pull the superpowers into full-scale war.
This is Jim McVeigh, reporting live from Kosovo. The first shots have been fired in a standoff between Russian and American peacekeepers in the Balkans.
Famine and war will come. Help will be too late. Iran mobilizes to invade Macedonia.
This is Catherine Hunt in Saudi Arabia. Forces of the Iranian Liberation Army have launched a surprise attack on Iraq and Afghanistan. The United States has launched an emergency airlift to resupply its bases.
Iran, supported by China, seizes the moment to create a pan-Islamic union absorbing Iraq, Kuwait, Afghanistan, and Jordan.
With Israeli forces fighting a desperate battle in the Negev, Iranian spearheads have pushed through the Sinai and are now only 50 miles east of Cairo.
Tunisia and Algeria will be incited by the Iranians.
Moscow is calm again after last night's bloody takeover by Russian nationalists. The Red Army is on full alert. We have reports of major troop movements towards the border with Poland and Hungary.
Troops will approach from Russia. The destroyer will ruin the ancient city. Italy will be destroyed.
Acting in concert with Russian forces, Iran initiates a pincer movement through the Mediterranean.
Are confirming rumors that Libyan forces under Colonel Gaddafi have now joined the Iranian army. We have seen massive troop movements towards the Mediterranean coast.
Good evening. The United States has announced that unless Iran ceases all offensive operations by midnight, Washington time, the United States will attack.
On the night of March 10th, American forces stage a daring night attack using airborne troops from bases in Saudi Arabia in order to strike into the soft underbelly of Iran. By early dawn, the U.S. forces have captured the southernmost provinces of Iraq and Iran. The Iranian occupation army in Europe is forced to turn back and meet the threat in the Middle East. The two armies meet in the middle in the ancient battlefield of Megiddo, in the heart of Israel, just as John of Patmos had prophesied.
We're going to keep it on the scope. I'm going to start shooting left and all of this. Okay.
ROKU 25, confirm staying clear of UN and 20. Yeah, we're above behind them.
And I got lights over here.
Fully fitted. Okay. Zero problem. Going back to wide on this track, one wide.
In all, the war will last 3 years and 7 months. Victory, says Nostradamus, will go to a man born on American soil. It is the last major war in human history. A war, if it comes, may not evolve as Nostradamus has described. There may be other sources of conflict on the horizon.
The unfortunate fact is that we have different countries with different kinds of interests. And those interests are going to vary, and those variations will lead to different kind of cycles in politics, history, economics, and so on. Nobody thought that Yugoslavia, for example, will be, which was the most developed country in the Eastern Bloc, will become such a disastrous social, political circumstance in the world. So it will happen. It will continue to happen, in my view.
Many scholars agree that the role of China is crucial. China today resembles the Soviet Union immediately after World War II. With its vast population and landmass, it has tremendous resources at its disposal. It can use these assets to become a prosperous member of the world community, or embark on a vast arms race to try to match its perceived adversaries, including the United States. The age of Pisces will soon be over. The age of Aquarius is upon us. It can be an age of great turmoil, or an age of peace and harmony. Long term, we have to accept the fact that the Earth's resources are finite, that we are destroying those very resources that have nurtured life for thousands of years. We must, for example, move away from fossil fuels to more benign, inexhaustible energy sources. This will also cut greenhouse gas emissions and the pollution of our air and water.
And if we want to live on this planet, then we all better get on board. We're going to have to, recycling is a small part. Learning what the dangers are and be willing to suffer the consequences in order to make the world a better place. To do without power, if that's what it takes. To do with less water, if that's what it takes. To do with products that aren't wrapped, if that's what it takes. To use different kinds of chemicals because they're safer. To put our energies into rebuilding the world, the natural world, instead of rebuilding industry or spending profit and so on.
Oil is now still abundant in supply. Oil is cheap. The use is easy. And to add to that, there are many multinationals whose profits depend on the sale of oil in the international market.
All nations must work together in making more efficient use of energy, water, and other materials, including expansion of conservation and recycling. If we don't take these steps on a global basis, our own children will not be able to have the carefree life that we enjoy today. Since the earliest of times, people believed that strange phenomena in the sky foretold of great changes on Earth. According to the Bible, shepherds attending the birth of Christ in Bethlehem saw a bright star in the sky. This could have been a supernova, perhaps observed by first-century Chinese astronomers. The Millennium Tapestry of Bayeux shows people in awe of a large, streaking comet. Right up to the 19th century, many associated the appearance of comets with change and upheaval, even disasters. The word disaster literally means bad star. But no prophecy is more chilling than the one foretold by Zarathustra, a wise man of the 6th century BC. He saw a huge celestial body known as a Gohir approach the earth with mankind powerless to stop it. According to Zarathustra, a huge firestorm would set the earth ablaze.
Because of their appearing essentially out of the blue with no warning, these are more or less the stealth bombers of the solar system world. They're there if they are in a Earth approaching or Earth crossing orbit. They could be something very serious in terms of any type of mitigation. We would not have much lead time.
The idea of Earth being threatened by a large asteroid or comet has inspired several recent Hollywood movies, but this is no fiction. Only in recent years, with new detection techniques, have we discovered just how many asteroids and comets are streaking through our galaxy and our solar system.
Comets are probably the most numerous objects within our solar system. There's billions and billions of comets on the very edge of our solar system, some 40 times or 1,000 times further out than Pluto's orbit. Most of them are small relative to the planets, but they're extremely numerous, and it's only when they come into the inner solar system that we begin to see them.
We think there are between 1,000 and 2,000 of these larger near-Earth asteroids out there, but we have actually discovered only 150 of them. And so we need to mount a comprehensive search to find the others, track their orbits, and see if any pose a danger to the Earth. The fact that the average interval between impacts is long doesn't mean that the risk is any less. The dinosaurs, one day before the asteroid that struck the Earth and led to their extinction, could have made the same statement, that such things didn't happen except at intervals of millions of years. Nevertheless, it hit the next year. There could be one of these killer asteroids on the way toward the Earth right now.
The sheer violence of a comet impact was brought uncomfortably close to home in 1994 when small pieces of a comet known as Shoemaker-Levy slammed into the planet Jupiter. The impacts produced explosions many thousands of miles high and left deep scars on the planet. Such bombardments are quite common and may, in fact, have helped create a life-sustaining atmosphere on Earth.
additional cometary impacts supplied the Earth with carbon-based molecules, water, methane, ammonia, a lot of the volatiles that are required for life to form.
It would be ironic indeed if a comet, the messenger of life on Earth, would also be responsible for wiping out that same life in the blink of an eye. With mankind slowly coming to grips with the real danger of such an event, NASA and other agencies are trying to develop ways to avert the Zarathustra scenario by developing technology to deflect or destroy the comet before impact. But that takes time, a lead time that Earth may not have.
There are lots of opportunities for asteroid or comet impacts on the Earth. When you ask yourself, when will it happen? We don't know. We don't have a clue. It could happen tomorrow, it could happen 100 million years from now. About the real answer, the only real answer we can give you is that it's happened before, and so it will happen again.
Zarathustra placed this terrible event some 3,000 years in the future, or shortly after the year 2000. Is there an alien intelligence out there? There are reports from all over the globe of strange sightings. Sightings that go back to well before 1900, when objects looking like flying saucers were first captured on film and published to a frightened world. New sightings have been captured on home video cameras in Europe, Latin America, and the United States. Official sources have always discounted the possibility of alien visits, but in recent years, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence has gained new momentum. A network of radio telescopes from Puerto Rico to Australia scans the heavens every night, waiting for a signal, a sign of an alien civilization. Statistically, the chance of us making contact in this millennium is high. There are some 100 billion galaxies in the universe. Each galaxy contains hundreds of billions of stars, very much like our own star, the Sun. Each of these stars may have one or several planets that could sustain life. Meanwhile, new stars are born from huge clouds of gases on an ongoing basis. At the same time, scientists expect to find confirmation that black holes in the universe offer portals for unlimited intergalactic travel far beyond the speed of light. And what if we did?
We'd forget all the little local differences that we have between our countries, and we would find out once and for all that we really are all human beings here on this earth together. Well, I don't suppose we can wait for some alien race to come down and threaten us.
It is possible that in the century to come, we will finally make contact with an alien source of intelligence.
So there's bound to be somebody out there. And really, the answer to the question, is there anyone out there, has profound meaning whichever the answer is. If the answer is one, it imposes a crushing uniqueness on humanity. It says we really need to take care of ourselves because we are the only one. And if the answer is 10,000 or 10 million, it's still uniquely profound because it then says we're not alone. There are others out there. There are other civilizations that have had to meet and solve the problems that we're facing today. So if they can do it, we can do it. And so there is a hope and there is a chance for our survival.
Such an encounter with a species vastly superior to ours would make us see the futility of armed conflict. It would help us realize the fragility and uniqueness of our planet. It would inspire us to take better care of what we still have today.
Because we can do things with science, science has taken the lead, and it's led us into all kinds of difficult places. A child can be born and have a biological mother, a birth mother, the mother who actually gave birth, who might be different than the biological mother, can have a biological father, can have a social mother, a social father. You know, the lawyer could be the actual parent, or the doctor could be the parent. And you know, I'm a sociologist, and our ability to deal with the social impact of just a small question like surrogacy, we are unable at this moment in time to deal with the implications of something like that. I don't think we're even close to being able to handle the questions that would arise through our scientific abilities in cloning and genetic engineering.
How will we cope with the growing ethical challenge of science manipulating life? Professor Sandra Kirby believes it will take a new form of leadership.
I think first what we'll see is we'll see a gender balance in the leadership that's currently there and the nations they come from. We'll start to see more equity. We'll start to see more women. We'll start to see more women in not just supportive roles but in leadership roles, with a large number of nations following them. And so when you add women into that, you bring a different view to the questions, and you bring different solutions, and you bring somehow more democracy.
Science and technology notwithstanding, the third millennium will reaffirm just how fragile life on Earth truly is. So much is riding on the shoulders of the new generation. Will they be able to cope with the accelerating pace of scientific and technological change, propelling us forward with ever greater speed to an uncertain future? And will they be able to make our planet a better place in the process?
The generation that's coming up, they've got 1,000 years to face. I think they're going to have much more skepticism. I hope a lot more information. They are an information generation like I've never seen before, a thirst for information, which I think is wonderful. The skepticism allows them, I hope, to sort through what is good and what is bad information. And because of that, I think they collectively will realize much more than we were ever able to realize in terms of their responsibility for the world, for the globe, for civilization, for space, for the well-being of others.
Gautama the Buddha, founder of the Buddhist faith, believed that every 25 centuries the great wheel of Dharma is turned afresh to help man reach a deeper consciousness. The seeds of a new millennium spirituality are visible everywhere, in churches, in prayer groups, and in the popularity of Asian religions, including Buddhism.
So young people, I want a message like this. Everyone needs to respect each other. They want themselves, everybody wants themselves to be successful, good, happy, joy. They don't like the suffering, pain, or happiness. And the speech is also try to make speech benefit for the others. so will not damage others by speech.
The last time the wheel of Dharma was turned was in the 6th century BC, in the time of Gautama the Buddha himself. The next time will be in the year 2012. By then, mankind can start afresh, and above all, learn to live with one another in peace.
People's fundamental values are changing. I think intolerance is out and tolerance is in. I think openness is in. The promise for us is our ability to work together and to understand each other. It's not to be separate and to step one on the other, to be the first one to the top of the pyramid. That kind of thinking is now almost passé. The world, the global village, is a small place.
Because we are social beings as well. We somehow need a community of other people, or we certainly have a lot that we could offer to other people. Whether you call that your church or your synagogue or your mosque, a community of other people with whom you can share your faith, and not necessarily in opposition to those who believe otherwise.
Oh, I see a need for purpose and meaning in life. There's tensions between legals and illegals. There's tensions between Spanish-speaking and bilinguals. There's tension between gays coming, or old people leaving, or new people, whatever. And I thought, God, isn't this wonderful? The Jews and Gentiles. You know, the tax collectors and the Christians, the Pharisees and the other nuts, the other people of religion, you know, all getting together and growing. Build that house into a home. Empower people to be comfortable with themselves and to see the power of their person.
In a time of great change, that we need some sense of higher power. As human beings, our need for a sense of spirit, a sense of something bigger than ourselves, a sense of the hereafter, I think has always been strong. We exhibit it in different ways. So I think organized religion might have a difficult time, but our sense of connectedness and maybe pure spirituality, I think, will be quite strong.
There will be a golden age. A universal peace will commence between God and man, and Satan will remain bound.
Whether through aliens, meteors, or a world coming to its senses, all prophets agree that we can avoid the doomsday scenario. All it takes is for us to have renewed respect for the greater forces of the universe, for the precious gift of life, for ourselves and for our fellow man.
We have a long way to go, but somehow I would think that we could look forward to the future with hope rather than with some sort of fear of an apocalyptic catastrophe.
Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. And I saw a holy city, the New Jerusalem. And God will dwell with them. He will wipe the tears from their eyes. Death will be no more. No more mourning, crying, and pain. For all these things will have passed away.